The photographer's flash went off just as Ashley pressed her lips against Tyler's mouth, and for a moment, time seemed frozen. There I was, Daniel, standing in my rented tuxedo watching my bride of exactly 47 minutes kiss another man. Behind the chapel, while our wedding guests were still inside celebrating what they thought was the happiest day of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me that the very camera I'd hired to capture our precious memories had instead documented the moment my marriage died. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What happened next would shock everyone at that wedding, including Ashley herself. You see, when I handed her over to Tyler without even a second of hesitation, nobody understood why. They thought I was just a broken man giving up. They had no idea that in that single moment, I was about to reveal something that would change everything they thought they knew about who really had the power in this situation. The morning of our wedding started like every fairy tale Ashley had ever dreamed of. Riverside Gardens was draped in white silk and baby's breath, the kind of venue that cost more per hour than most people made in a month. Ashley had insisted on having the ceremony there, even though I'd suggested several more modest locations that would have been just as beautiful. But Ashley had a vision, and that vision required the most expensive everything. I'd been working 3 jobs to pay for this wedding. At least, that's what everyone believed. Every morning at 5, I'd be at the farmer's market setting up the produce stand that belonged to old Mr. Henderson. Then I'd rush to my afternoon shift at the campus bookstore, where I'd help college students find their textbooks and pretend I wasn't exhausted. Evenings found me delivering food for various restaurants around Portland, driving my beat-up Honda Civic from one apartment complex to another. Ashley's friends, especially Chloe, never let me forget how lucky I was to have someone like Ashley. During our engagement party 6 months ago, Chloe had pulled me aside and said with that condescending smile of hers, "You know, Daniel, Ashley could have had anyone. Tyler Morrison asked her out just last week, and his family owns half the commercial real estate downtown. But she chose you, so you better not mess this up." Tyler Morrison. Even his name sounded like money. He'd gone to private school with Ashley and Chloe, while I'd worked my way through Portland State on scholarships and student loans. Tyler drove a black Mercedes that probably cost more than I made in 2 years, and he had this way of showing up wherever Ashley and I were, always with some excuse about running into us by coincidence. The rehearsal dinner had been particularly awkward. Tyler had somehow secured an invitation, claiming he was an old family friend of Ashley's parents. He'd spent the entire evening regaling the table with stories about his recent trip to Monaco and his family's new yacht. Ashley hung on every word, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen her look at me in months. "Daniel," Tyler had said, raising his wine glass, "I have to admire a man who works so hard for love. 3 jobs just to give Ashley the wedding she deserves. That's real dedication." The way he said it made it sound like pity rather than admiration, and I could see several people at the table exchanging glances. Ashley's father, Robert, had given me one of those looks that said he was questioning his daughter's choice. Her mother, Patricia, had been polite but distant ever since learning about my financial situation. They'd wanted Ashley to marry someone from their social circle, someone who could maintain the lifestyle they'd provided for her. That night, Ashley had been unusually quiet as we drove home from the rehearsal dinner. Finally, she'd broken the silence. "Daniel, are you sure we're doing the right thing?" "What do you mean?" I'd asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly what she meant. "I love you, I do. But sometimes I wonder if love is enough." Tyler was telling me about this business opportunity, how he's expanding his family's real estate portfolio. He said he could use someone with my marketing background. I'd felt a chill run down my spine. "Ashley, we're getting married tomorrow. Are you having second thoughts?" She'd quickly backtracked, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "No, of course not. I'm just nervous, that's all. Every bride gets nervous." But there had been something in her voice that didn't ring true. The morning of the wedding, I'd arrived at Riverside Gardens early to help with the setup. The florist was arranging the altar decorations when Tyler appeared, dressed in an expensive suit and carrying a bouquet of white orchids. "These are for Ashley," he'd said casually. "A little wedding gift from an old friend." I'd wanted to tell him to leave, but Ashley's cousin Nina, who was serving as the wedding coordinator, had intervened. "That's so thoughtful, Tyler. I'm Sure, Ashley will love them. Nina was the only one in Ashley's family who'd ever treated me with genuine warmth. She worked as a teacher at an inner-city school and understood what it meant to work hard for everything you had. While everyone else saw my multiple jobs as evidence of my limited prospects, Nina saw them as proof of my determination. "Don't let them get to you," she'd whispered to me as Tyler handed over the orchids. "Ashley's lucky to have someone who loves her enough to work this hard." But even Nina didn't know the full truth about my situation. Nobody did. The ceremony itself had been beautiful. Everything Ashley had dreamed of. She'd looked stunning in her designer dress, a creation that had cost more than my Honda was worth. Her veil had been her grandmother's, a family heirloom that connected her to generations of women who'd married well and lived comfortably. As we'd exchanged vows, I'd looked into Ashley's eyes and seen something that made my heart ache. She was going through the motions, saying the words she was supposed to say, but there was a distance there that hadn't existed when we first fell in love 2 years ago. The reception had started perfectly. Our first dance was to "At Last" by Etta James, and for a few minutes, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. Ashley had whispered in my ear, "I'm sorry about last night. I was just scared. I love you, Daniel." I'd wanted to believe her. I'd held her close and told myself that everything would be fine once we were officially married, once the stress of the wedding planning was behind us. But then Tyler had asked to cut in. "Just one dance with the bride," he'd said with that confident smile of his. "For old time's sake." Ashley had looked at me for permission, and I'd nodded because what else could I do without causing a scene? At our own wedding? I'd watched them dance, noting how easily they moved together, how Tyler's hand rested just a little too low on her back, how Ashley laughed at something he whispered in her ear. Chloe had appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "They look good together, don't they?" she'd said, and there was something in her tone that made me look at her sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Oh, nothing. Just that some people are naturally suited for each other. Same background, same social circle, same expectations, for life." She'd taken a sip of champagne and added, "Of course, Ashley made her choice. For better or worse, as they say." The emphasis she'd placed on "worse" had been unmistakable. After the dance, Tyler had pulled Ashley aside, claiming he needed to speak with her about something important. They'd stepped out onto the terrace that overlooked the gardens, and I'd tried not to watch them through the windows. But when their conversation had stretched on for 15 minutes, I'd started to worry. Nina had noticed my distraction. "Everything okay, Daniel?" "Ashley's been out there with Tyler for a while," I'd said, trying to keep my voice casual. Nina had frowned and looked toward the terrace. "Want me to go check on her?" Before I could answer, Chloe had reappeared with several other guests in tow. "Daniel, we need the groom for pictures. The photographer wants to get some shots with the groomsmen while the light is still good." The photo session had taken longer than expected. The photographer, a meticulous artist who refused to settle for anything less than perfection, had insisted on multiple shots from different angles. By the time we were finished, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the gardens. "Where's Ashley?" I'd asked as we'd wrapped up. "She went to touch up her makeup," one of the bridesmaids had said. "She should be back soon." But Ashley wasn't in the bridal suite when I'd checked. Her makeup artist hadn't seen her in over an hour. A growing sense of unease had settled in my stomach as I'd searched the reception hall, the kitchen, even the parking lot. It was Nina, who'd suggested checking the chapel. "Maybe she went back there for a quiet moment," she'd said. "Some brides like to have a few minutes alone in the place where they got married." We'd walked across the gardens together, our footsteps muffled by the evening dew settling on the grass. The chapel was lit by a single spotlight, creating dramatic shadows among the trees that surrounded it. That's when I'd heard the voices. Tyler's voice had carried through the evening air, low and urgent. "Ashley, you don't have to go through with this. It's not too late to change your mind. Tyler, please. I'm married now. This is my wedding day. To a man who can barely afford to keep you in the lifestyle you deserve. Come on, Ashley. You know you felt something when we danced. You know this isn't what you really want." I'd motioned for Nina to stay back as I'd moved closer to the chapel. Through the stained glass windows, I could see their silhouettes, standing close together near the altar where Ashley and I had exchanged vows just hours earlier. My family's been pushing me toward this for months, Tyler had continued. They think you'd be perfect for our business ventures. We could travel together, work together, build something amazing. You wouldn't have to worry about money ever again. Daniel works hard, Ashley had said, but her voice had lacked conviction. He loves me. I love you too. I always have. I should have said something sooner, but I thought you knew. Ashley, I can give you everything you've ever wanted. A house in the hills, vacations in Europe, a life where you never have to worry about whether you can afford something. There had been a long pause, and I'd held my breath, waiting for Ashley to tell Tyler that money wasn't everything, that love was more important than wealth, that she'd chosen me for reasons that had nothing to do with material possessions. Instead, she'd said, "What would people think? I just got married. Everyone's here, celebrating. People would understand. Better to realize your mistake now than spend years in an unhappy marriage. Ashley, look at me. Tell me you don't feel anything." I'd watched through the window as Tyler had reached out to cup Ashley's face in his hands. She hadn't pulled away. Instead, she'd leaned into his touch, closing her eyes as if she'd been waiting for this moment all evening. "I'm scared," she'd whispered. "Don't be. I'll take care of everything. We can leave tonight if you want. I have a place in San Francisco, where we can stay until things settle down." That's when I'd realized that this wasn't a spontaneous moment of weakness. This was a plan. Tyler had come to my wedding with the intention of stealing my bride, and Ashley had been considering it, seriously enough to meet him in private. "What about Daniel?" Ashley had asked. "Daniel will be fine. He's young. He'll bounce back. And honestly, Ashley, you'd be doing him a favor. He deserves someone who really wants to be with him, not someone who's settling because she feels guilty about wanting more." The casual dismissal of my feelings, the assumption that I'd simply bounce back from having my wife stolen on my wedding day, had filled me with a cold rage. But I'd forced myself to stay quiet, to wait and see what Ashley would choose. "You're right," she'd said finally. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. I do want more. I want the life you're offering. But Daniel..." "Forget about Daniel for a minute. What do you want, Ashley? If you could have anything in the world, what would it be?" She'd been quiet for a long moment, and I'd found myself hoping against hope that she'd say she wanted love, that she wanted someone who valued her for more than her ability to enhance a business portfolio. Instead, she'd said, "I want security. I want to know that I'll never have to worry about money, never have to choose between the things I want and the things I need. I want to travel and see the world and wear beautiful clothes and live in a house that people admire." "Then choose me," Tyler had said. "Choose the life you really want." And that's when Ashley had made her choice. She'd risen up on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to Tyler's, kissing him with a passion I hadn't seen from her in months. The photographer's flash had gone off at that exact moment, capturing the scene in stark, undeniable detail. I'd turned to see Nina standing behind me, her face pale with shock, still holding the camera she'd borrowed to take some candid shots of the reception. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," she'd whispered. "I didn't know they were in there. I just wanted to get a picture of the chapel at sunset." But I'd smiled, a slow, genuine smile that had confused her. "Don't be sorry, Nina. That photograph is going to be very important. Because what neither Ashley nor Tyler knew, what nobody at that wedding knew, except for Nina, who was about to find out, was that this betrayal was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. You see, while everyone thought they knew exactly who Daniel was, they were about to discover that appearances can be very, very deceiving. And the man Ashley had just dismissed as someone who would simply bounce back was about to show her and everyone else at that wedding exactly what a mistake she just made. I walked up to the chapel doors and knocked firmly. The sound echoed through the evening air, sharp and deliberate. Inside, I could hear Ashley gasp and the hurried shuffling of feet as they tried to compose themselves. "Just a moment," Tyler called out, his voice strained with barely concealed panic. When the Doors finally opened. Ashley appeared first. Her lipstick smudged and her hair slightly disheveled. She'd clearly tried to fix herself up quickly, but the evidence of what had just happened was written all over her face. Behind her, Tyler straightened his tie with shaking hands, avoiding my gaze entirely. "Daniel," Ashley said, forcing a bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be with our guests?" "I was looking for my wife," I said calmly, emphasizing the word wife just enough to make Tyler flinch. People were asking where the bride had disappeared to. "I just needed some air," Ashley replied quickly. The reception was getting a bit overwhelming, and Tyler offered to walk with me to make sure I was safe. "How thoughtful of him," I said, pulling out my phone. "Nina got some beautiful shots of the chapel at sunset. Would you like to see them?" The color drained from Ashley's face as I showed her the photograph. There, in crystal clear detail, was the moment she'd chosen Tyler over our marriage. The lighting had been perfect, the angle capturing both their faces as they kissed passionately in front of the altar where we'd just exchanged vows. Tyler's confident demeanor cracked immediately. "Look, man, I can explain." "Actually, you can't," I interrupted. "A picture tells the whole story. But what's interesting is what happened right before this photo was taken." I scrolled back to the previous image Nina had captured. It showed Tyler and Ashley in deep conversation, their body language intimate and conspiratorial. But in the background, barely visible through the chapel window, was something that made Tyler's eyes widen in recognition. "Is that your Mercedes?" I asked conversationally. "The black one parked in the loading zone behind the chapel?" Tyler nodded mutely, clearly wondering where I was going with this. "That's strange," I continued, "because I specifically remember the venue coordinator announcing that the loading zone was reserved for vendor deliveries only. In fact, I think she mentioned that any unauthorized vehicles would be towed." "Towed?" Tyler repeated, his voice cracking slightly. I walked past them and gestured toward the back of the chapel. Through the trees, we could see the loading zone clearly. It was empty except for a few orange traffic cones. "When did you park there?" I asked. "About an hour ago," Tyler admitted, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "And when did you last check on your car?" I haven't. We came straight here after I asked Ashley to talk." I nodded sympathetically. "You might want to call your insurance company. Portland Towing Services is pretty efficient, especially when the venue specifically requests priority removal of unauthorized vehicles." Tyler pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed his insurance company. As he spoke in hushed, panicked tones, I turned my attention to Ashley, who was watching the conversation with growing confusion. "I don't understand," she said. "Why are you being so calm about this? You just saw me kissing another man." "Did I?" I asked, scrolling through the photos again. "Because what I see here is a woman making a choice. You chose Tyler, which means you chose his lifestyle, his problems, and his responsibilities." "What do you mean, his responsibilities?" Before I could answer, Tyler finished his call and turned back to us, his face ashen. "They towed it to the impound lot. The fine is $800, plus storage fees for every day it stays there." $800? Ashley repeated, her voice rising. "For a parking violation?" "It gets worse," Tyler continued. "They said someone called in a complaint about the vehicle being abandoned in a loading zone, and they treated it as a priority removal. The base fine is $300, but there's a $500 fee for emergency towing services." I couldn't help but smile. That someone would be me. I called it in about 30 minutes ago when I noticed an unauthorized vehicle blocking potential emergency access to the chapel. Tyler stared at me in disbelief. "You called to have my car towed?" "I called to have an illegally parked vehicle removed from venue property. The fact that it belonged to the man who was planning to steal my wife is just a convenient coincidence." Ashley's confusion was deepening. "But how did you know Tyler was planning anything? And why would you?" "Because," I said, turning to face her fully, "Tyler isn't as subtle as he thinks he is. Did you really believe that showing up to our wedding with orchids and convenient business opportunities was spontaneous? Did you think I didn't notice how he always seemed to appear wherever we were? How he always had just the right story about his wealth and success to make me look inadequate by comparison?" Tyler's face was turning red. "You can't prove any of that." Actually, I can. Nina, would you mind joining us? Nina emerged from behind the tree where she'd been waiting, still holding the camera, but now she was also holding her phone, and Tyler could see that it was recording. How long has she been recording? Tyler asked, his voice barely a whisper. Since right before you told Ashley that she'd be doing me a favor by leaving me because I deserve someone who really wants to be with me, I replied. Very thoughtful of you to be so concerned about my feelings. Ashley's mouth fell open. You recorded our conversation? Nina did, I corrected. I just asked her to document any interesting interactions she might observe. As the official photographer for the evening, it's her job to capture memorable moments. Tyler was beginning to pace, running his hands through his hair. Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Maybe we can work something out. I'll pay the towing fees, and we can all just forget this happened. Forget what happened? I asked innocently. That you conspired to break up a marriage on the wedding day. That you convinced my wife to abandon her vows less than 2 hours after making them? Or that you parked illegally and got your car towed? All of it, Tyler said desperately. The whole thing. Ashley, tell him you want to work this out. But Ashley was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and growing suspicion. Daniel, you're acting strange. This isn't like you at all. Isn't it? How would you know what I'm really like, Ashley? When's the last time you asked me about my day, about my dreams, about anything that wasn't related to wedding planning or your dissatisfaction with our financial situation? She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. You know what I think? I continued. I think you've been so focused on what you thought I couldn't give you that you never bothered to find out what I actually could give you. Tyler's phone rang, interrupting the moment. He answered it frantically. Hello? Yes, this is Tyler Morrison. What do you mean there's a problem with my credit card? As Tyler argued with whoever was on the other end of the line, Ashley stepped closer to me. Daniel, what's happening? You're talking like you know something we don't. I know lots of things you don't, Ashley. For instance, I know that Tyler's family business isn't as successful as he's led you to believe. I know that his father's been struggling to make rent on their commercial properties for the past 6 months. I know that the yacht he mentioned at the rehearsal dinner belongs to a friend of the family, not to his family directly. How could you possibly know all that? Because unlike you, I do my research before making important decisions. When the man who's been circling my fiancée like a vulture suddenly shows up everywhere we go, I tend to investigate. Tyler finished his call and turned back to us, his face now completely pale. There's been a mistake with my account. They're saying my card has been declined for the towing fees. What kind of mistake? Ashley asked, though she was beginning to look worried. They're saying there's a hold on my account pending some kind of investigation. But that's impossible. My father handles all the business finances. I pulled out my own phone and made a quick call. Hi, this is Daniel. Is everything ready on your end? Perfect. Yes, I'll be there in about 20 minutes. Ashley watched me hang up with growing alarm. Who was that? Someone who's going to help us sort out this whole situation, I said. But first, Tyler, you might want to call your father. Something tells me he's going to have some interesting news for you. What are you talking about? Tyler demanded. But his bravado was completely gone now. Well, it's possible that your family's financial situation isn't quite as stable as you've been telling people. It's also possible that someone might have brought certain irregularities in your business practices to the attention of the appropriate authorities. Tyler's hands were shaking as he dialed his father's number. The conversation that followed was brief and devastating. Dad? What do you mean there's been an audit? What investigation? How long has this been going on? Ashley and I could only hear Tyler's side of the conversation, but it was enough to paint a clear picture. His father's voice, raised in anger and panic, was audible even through the phone. 6 months? You've known about this for 6 months and didn't tell me? What, do you mean the yacht was repossessed? Dad, I just told someone we owned it. When Tyler finally hung up, he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Tyler, Ashley said tentatively, what's happening? My father's business is being investigated for tax evasion and fraudulent accounting practices, Tyler said numbly. The government has frozen all our assets pending the investigation. Everything I told you about our wealth, our properties, our future plans, none of it is real anymore. Ashley stared at him in shock. But you said your family could give me the life I wanted. I thought we could. I thought this investigation would blow over. My father told me it was just a routine audit, that everything would be fine. He said if I could find someone to marry, someone with a clean financial background, it would help stabilize our situation. You wanted to marry me to help your family's legal problems? Ashley's voice was rising dangerously. Not just that, Tyler said quickly. I do care about you, Ashley. But yes, my father thought that having a stable marriage might help our case with the investigators. Nina, who had been quietly documenting this entire exchange, finally spoke up. So let me get this straight. You came to Daniel and Ashley's wedding planning to convince Ashley to leave her husband so she could help you commit fraud? It's not fraud, Tyler protested. It's just strategic marriage planning. To someone who was already married to someone else, I pointed out. Which would make Ashley an unwitting accomplice to whatever scheme you and your father were cooking. Up. Ashley took several steps back from Tyler, her face a mask of horror. You were going to use me. Ashley, please, let me explain. Explain what? That everything you told me was a lie? That you don't actually have money or property or any of the things you promised? That you were planning to drag me into some kind of criminal investigation? Tyler reached for her, but she jerked away from his touch. And you, she said, turning to me with fury in her eyes. How long have you known about this? I started investigating Tyler about 3 weeks ago, I admitted. It wasn't hard to find the information once I knew where to look. Public records are surprisingly accessible when you know how to search them. 3 weeks? You've known for 3 weeks that he was lying, and you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was just jealous and trying to sabotage your friendship with a wealthy man? Ashley opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, realizing I was right. Besides, I continued, I wanted to see what you would choose when you thought you had a real option. I needed to know whether you loved me for who I am, or whether you were just settling for me because you thought you couldn't do better. That's not fair, Daniel. You can't test someone like that. Can't I? Ashley, you just threw away our marriage for a man you've known for less than a year, based on nothing more than his promises of wealth. You didn't even question whether those promises were real. You were so eager to upgrade your life that you didn't bother to verify whether the upgrade actually existed. Tyler, meanwhile, was frantically making phone calls, trying to reach lawyers, accountants, anyone who might be able to help him navigate the disaster his life had just become. But it was clear from his increasingly desperate conversations that the situation was far worse than he'd initially realized. The IRS has seized all of our accounts, he said after finishing his latest call. My father's been arrested. They're saying the investigation has been going on for over a year, and they have evidence of systematic tax fraud going back 5 years. Ashley sank down onto the chapel steps, her expensive wedding dress pooling around her like a white puddle. This can't be happening. This morning everything was perfect. Perfect? I asked. Ashley, this morning you were marrying a man you didn't love while planning to leave him for someone you barely knew. In what universe is that perfect? I did love you, she said weakly. I do love you. No, you don't. You love the idea of me, the security of having someone who adores you, but you don't love me enough to be satisfied with what we have together. You love me just enough to feel guilty about wanting someone else. Nina cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt, but Daniel, your phone is ringing. I checked the caller ID and smiled. Perfect timing. Tyler, Ashley, I think you're both going to want to hear this conversation. As I answered the phone, I could see the confusion and growing dread on both their faces. They were starting to realize that this evening was far from over, and that whatever I had planned next was going to change everything they thought they knew about the balance of power in this situation. Because while Tyler's lies were finally catching up with him, and while Ashley was discovering that her dream of marrying into wealth was actually a nightmare of potential criminal liability, I hadn't even begun to reveal the biggest surprise of the evening. The conversation I was about to have would flip this entire situation upside down, and both Ashley and Tyler were about to learn that the man they'd so casually dismissed as a struggling worker was actually holding all the cards in this game. Hello, Marcus, I said into the phone, making sure my voice carried clearly in the evening air. Yes, everything is proceeding exactly as we discussed. Are the contracts ready for signature? Ashley and Tyler exchanged confused glances as I listened to the response on the other end of the line. Excellent. And the financing is all in place? Perfect. I'll be there within the hour to finalize everything. I paused, noting how intently both Ashley and Tyler were listening. Oh, and Marcus? Make sure the press release goes out first thing Monday morning. I want maximum coverage for the acquisition announcement. When I hung up, Ashley was staring at me with a mixture of confusion and growing suspicion. Daniel, who was that? What acquisition? That was Marcus Wellington from Wellington and Associates, I said casually, enjoying the way Tyler's face went white at the mention of the name. He's been handling some business for me. Tyler's voice came out as barely a whisper. Wellington and Associates? The investment firm? You know them? I asked with mock surprise. Oh, that's right. They're the ones who've been investigating your family's business practices. Small world, isn't it? Ashley looked back and forth between us, clearly lost. I don't understand what's happening here. Tyler can explain, I said. Can't you? Tyler? Tell Ashley how Wellington and Associates got involved in your family's affairs. Tyler's hands were shaking now. They're the firm that exposed the fraud. They've been building a case against my father for months. They're the reason everything fell apart. Actually, I corrected, they're the firm I hired to investigate your family's finances 3 weeks ago. The IRS investigation was already underway, but it was moving slowly. I simply provided them with some additional information that helped accelerate their timeline. Ashley stood up abruptly, her dress rustling in the silence. You hired them, Daniel? What are you talking about? How could you possibly afford to hire an investment firm? That's an interesting question, Ashley. How much do you think it costs to hire Wellington and Associates for a private investigation? She shook her head helplessly. I have no idea. Thousands of dollars? Tens of thousands? Try 6 figures, I said. Marcus charges $300 an hour, and his team has been working on this for 3 weeks. The bill so far is just over $47,000. $47,000? Ashley's voice cracked. Daniel, that's impossible. You work 3 jobs just to pay our bills. You don't have that kind of money. Don't I? I pulled out my wallet and handed her a business card. What does this say? Ashley read the card aloud, her voice growing fainter with each word. Daniel, Morrison, President and CEO, Morrison Holdings, LLC. She looked up at me, her face pale. Morrison Holdings. Tyler, isn't that? Tyler nodded miserably. That's the company that owns half the commercial real estate downtown. The company my father's been trying to compete with for years. The company that's been systematically buying up properties and forcing smaller firms like ours into bankruptcy. Congratulations, Ashley, I said. You just kissed the son of the man who's been destroying Tyler's family business. And Tyler, congratulations to you too. You just tried to steal the wife of the man who's about to finish what his father started. Ashley sank back down onto the chapel steps, staring at the business card as if it might burst into flames. This can't be real. You hand out flyers. You work at the bookstore. You deliver food. I do hand out flyers, I agreed, for the businesses I own. I work at the bookstore because I bought it 6 months ago, and I like to stay involved in day-to-day operations. And I deliver food because I own a stake in 7 restaurants around Portland, and I believe in understanding every aspect of my investments. Nina stepped forward, her camera still recording. Daniel, why didn't you ever tell anyone? Why keep it secret? Because I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am, not what I have. Someone who would be content with a simple life, who would value character over cash, who would choose love over luxury. I looked directly at Ashley. I thought I'd found that person. Clearly, I was wrong. Tyler was pacing again, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. This is insane. You're telling me that while I was bragging about my family's wealth, I was actually talking to someone who's worth more than my entire family combined? Not just worth more, Tyler. I'm the one who destroyed your family's business empire. My father started buying up commercial properties in this area 20 years ago. When he died 2 years ago, I inherited the company and decided to accelerate the expansion. Your father's company was one of the obstacles we needed to remove. You killed my father's business on purpose? I killed your father's business because he was cutting corners, cheating on taxes, and providing substandard services to his tenants. The investigation I funded simply brought those practices to light. If your family had been running an honest operation, there would have been nothing to find. Ashley finally found her voice again. 2 years ago. You inherited the company 2 years ago. That's when we started dating. Coincidence, I said. I met you at a coffee shop, remember? You were complaining to your friend about how hard it was to find a guy who wasn't just interested in your family's money. You said you wanted someone genuine, someone who would love you for yourself. So you pretended to be poor? I never pretended anything. I never lied about what I did for work. I told you I worked multiple jobs, which is true. I told you I was saving money for our future, which is also true. You simply assumed that because I wasn't flashy with my wealth, I didn't have any. Tyler stopped pacing and turned to face me. If you're so wealthy, why are you living in that tiny apartment? Why drive that beat-up Honda? Why wear clothes from discount stores? Because material possessions don't define who I am. I live in a modest apartment because I don't need a mansion to be happy. I drive an old car because it gets me where I need to go. I wear simple clothes because I'm not trying to impress anyone with my wardrobe. But you let everyone think you were struggling, Ashley protested. You let me feel sorry for you. I let you reveal your true character, I corrected. And what I discovered is that you're exactly like Tyler. You're both so focused on appearances, on status symbols, on what other people think, that you can't see past the surface of anything. Ashley's phone started ringing. She looked at the caller ID, and her face went even paler. It's my mother. You should answer it, I suggested. I have a feeling she's going to have some interesting news. Ashley answered the call with trembling hands. Hi, Mom, what's wrong? Even from several feet away, we could hear Patricia's excited voice through the phone. Ashley, darling, you'll never guess what's happened. Robert just got a call from the country club. Apparently Daniel's family has been members there for years, but they keep a very low profile. The Morrison family owns half the commercial district. Downtown, do you have any idea how wealthy your new husband is? Ashley's face cycled through several emotions before settling on something that looked like nausea. Mom, I have to call you back. But Ashley, this is wonderful news. We had no idea Daniel came from such a prominent family. Your father is beside himself with excitement. He's already talking about business opportunities and… Ashley hung up without saying goodbye. Let me guess, I said. Your parents have suddenly discovered my family's reputation. The country club, Ashley whispered. They called to congratulate my parents on my marriage to a Morrison. The Morrison family has been members there since 1952, I said. My grandfather was one of the founding members. We just don't make a big show of it. Tyler laughed bitterly. This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. I came here tonight to steal a poor man's wife, and it turns out I was actually trying to rob the richest guy in Portland. Not just trying, Tyler. You succeeded. Ashley made her choice. She chose you, which means she chose everything that comes with you, including your family's legal problems. Ashley looked up sharply. What do you mean, everything that comes with him? Well, Ashley, by kissing Tyler and agreeing to leave with him, you made it clear that you wanted to be associated with him rather than me. That's fine. But it does create some complications. What kind of complications? I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a news article. This was published about an hour ago. Federal investigation leads to arrests in real estate fraud case. It mentions that investigators are looking into all personal and professional relationships connected to the Morrison family business. Ashley snatched the phone from my hands and read the article aloud. Anyone found to have knowingly participated in or benefited from the fraudulent activities may face charges ranging from conspiracy to money laundering. She looked up at me in horror. They're going to investigate anyone connected to Tyler's family? It's standard procedure in white-collar crime cases, I confirmed. They cast a wide net to make sure they catch all the participants. But I didn't participate in anything. I don't know anything about Tyler's business. True, but you were photographed kissing him at a wedding, and there's video evidence of you agreeing to leave your husband to be with him. That could be interpreted as evidence of a personal relationship that predates tonight. Tyler was frantically reading the article over Ashley's shoulder. This says they're freezing the assets of anyone who might have received money or gifts from the family business. Ashley, what if they think the engagement ring I gave you was bought with stolen money? What engagement ring? Ashley asked. The one I was planning to give you tonight. I brought it with me, thinking that once you agreed to leave Daniel, I could propose properly. Ashley stared at him in disbelief. You brought an engagement ring to my wedding? I thought it would be romantic, a symbol of our new beginning together. Tyler, I said quietly, where did you get the money for an engagement ring? According to the article, your family's assets have been frozen for months. Tyler's face went ashen. I borrowed it from the business account, just temporarily. I was going to put it back once Ashley and I were married and our finances were combined. You stole money from a company that's under federal investigation to buy a ring for a married woman? Ashley's voice was rising toward hysteria. It wasn't stealing. It was borrowing. And you weren't going to stay married. Nina lowered her camera for a moment. Tyler, please tell me you don't actually have that ring with you right now. Tyler reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I was going to wait for the right moment to give it to her. Tyler, I said slowly, do you realize that by carrying that ring tonight, you've just committed federal theft? And by planning to give it to Ashley, you were about to make her an accessory to that theft. Ashley scrambled away from Tyler as if he were radioactive. Get that thing away from me. I don't want anything to do with it. But Ashley, it's a 2-carat diamond. It's worth more than Daniel makes in a year. Actually, I corrected, it's worth about what I make in an hour. But more importantly, Tyler, it's stolen property, and you just admitted to theft in front of witnesses while being recorded. Tyler looked at the ring box in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. I was going to put the money back. With what money, Tyler? Your family is bankrupt. The government has seized all your assets. Even if you weren't facing criminal charges, you don't have any legal income to repay what you stole. Ashley was breathing heavily now, her hands pressed to her chest. This isn't happening. This can't be happening. I was supposed to be marrying up, not getting dragged into a federal crime. You were marrying up, I pointed out. You just didn't realize it until it was too late. Tyler suddenly grabbed Ashley's arm. We can still make this work. If we leave tonight, go to Canada maybe, we can disappear until this all blows over. Let go of me, Ashley said, trying to pull away from his grip. You want me to flee the country with you? You want me to become a fugitive? It's better than facing federal charges. Tyler, Nina said firmly. You need to let go of Ashley right now. You're talking about kidnapping and international flight to avoid prosecution. You're making this situation much worse. But Tyler wasn't listening anymore. The reality of his situation was crashing down on him, and he was becoming increasingly desperate. Ashley, please. I love you. We can figure this out together. My family has connections in other countries. We can start over somewhere else. Your family has connections in federal prison, I said. Tyler, you need to face reality. Your father is under arrest. Your assets are frozen. You're carrying stolen property. And now you're talking about fleeing the country with a woman who clearly doesn't want to go with you. She does want to go with me. Tell him, Ashley. Tell him you choose me. Ashley looked at Tyler, then at me, then back at Tyler. For a moment, the only sound was the distant music from our wedding reception, where 200 guests were still celebrating what they thought was the happiest day of my life. I choose, Ashley said slowly, to not go to prison for someone else's crimes. Tyler's grip on her arm tightened. You can't abandon me now, not after everything I've done for you. Everything you've done for me? Tyler, you've ruined my life. You made me betray my husband. You almost made me an accessory to theft. And now you want me to become an international fugitive. What exactly have you done for me? I showed you what real wealth looks like. I showed you what your life could be. You showed me lies, Ashley said, finally pulling free from his grasp. Everything you told me was a fantasy. Your wealth, your family's success, your business opportunities, All of it was built on fraud and theft. Tyler looked around desperately, as if searching for some escape from the reality closing in around him. His gaze landed on Nina, still recording everything with her camera. "You," he said, pointing at her. "You've been recording this whole time. That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent." "Actually," Nina replied calmly, "we're on private property at a public event, and I'm the official photographer. Everyone signed releases when they agreed to attend the wedding. Plus, this conversation is taking place in a public area of the venue grounds. But you're recording me admitting to crimes. That has to be inadmissible in court." "Tyler, I said you admitted to crimes voluntarily in front of multiple witnesses while trying to convince a married woman to flee the country with you. The recording is just documentation." Tyler sat down heavily on the chapel steps, the stolen engagement, ring still clutched in his hand. "This is a nightmare. This morning I thought I was going to steal a beautiful woman from a poor man and give her the life she deserved. Now I'm facing federal charges, my family is ruined, and the poor man turns out to be richer than I ever dreamed of being. That's what happens when you build your life on lies and theft," I said. "Eventually, reality catches up with you." Ashley was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Daniel, why didn't you stop this earlier? Why did you let it go this far?" "Because I needed to know who you really are, Ashley. I needed to see what you would choose when you thought you had better options. And I needed to give Tyler enough rope to hang himself with." "But you knew he was a criminal. You knew he was planning to drag me into his problems." "I knew he was a liar and a fraud. I suspected he might be desperate enough to do something stupid, but I didn't know about the stolen ring until he pulled it out just now." Tyler looked up at me with something approaching admiration. "You played us both perfectly, didn't you? You set this whole thing up." "I didn't set anything up, Tyler. I just gave you the opportunity to reveal your true character. You're the one who chose to steal from your family's business. You're the one who chose to come to my wedding with plans to steal my wife. You're the one who chose to bring stolen property with you and then admit to theft in front of witnesses. And Ashley," I continued, turning to my wife, "you're the one who chose to believe Tyler's lies without questioning them. You're the one who chose to meet him in private on our wedding day. You're the one who chose to kiss him in the chapel, where we were married." Ashley wrapped her arms around herself, shivering despite the warm evening air. "So, what happens now?" "Now," I said, "we all live with the consequences of our choices." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the evening air, growing louder with each passing second. Tyler's head snapped up, his eyes wide with panic, as he realized what was happening. "You called the police?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I called several people," I replied calmly. The police were just one of them. 3 patrol cars pulled into the venue parking lot, their red and blue lights casting eerie shadows across the chapel grounds. Behind them came an unmarked sedan that I recognized as belonging to the federal task force that had been investigating Tyler's family. Agent Rebecca Torres stepped out of the sedan, her badge gleaming in the flashing lights. She was a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair, and the kind of presence that commanded immediate attention. I'd been working with her team for weeks, providing information about Tyler's family's business practices. "Mr. Morrison," she said as she approached our group, "thank you for calling. I understand we have a situation here." "Agent Torres," I nodded. "Tyler Morrison is in possession of stolen property, specifically an engagement ring purchased with funds embezzled from Morrison Real Estate Holdings. He's also just confessed to theft in front of multiple witnesses." Tyler scrambled to his feet, still clutching the ring box. "Wait, you can't arrest me. I haven't done anything wrong. The money was just borrowed." "Mr. Morrison," Agent Torres said, her voice professionally neutral, "I'm Agent Torres with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and theft in connection with your family's business activities. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. But I'm not part of the business. I don't know anything about what my father did." Agent Torres glanced at me, and I nodded toward Nina, who was still recording. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, we have video evidence of you admitting to taking money from the business account to purchase that ring. We also have evidence of you attempting to flee the country to avoid prosecution." Ashley stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Agent Torres, I need you to know that I had nothing to do with any of this. I didn't know Tyler was involved in criminal activities. I certainly didn't know about any stolen ring. Mrs. Morrison, Agent Torres said, and I noticed how Ashley flinched at the use of her married name. We're not currently investigating you for any criminal activity. However, we would like to speak with you about your relationship with Tyler Morrison and any gifts or financial benefits you may have received from the Morrison family. I haven't received anything from them, Ashley said quickly. Tyler never gave me any gifts, and we only met a few months ago. Actually, Tyler interrupted desperately, that's not true. Ashley, tell them about the jewelry I bought you. Tell them about the vacation I was planning for us. Ashley stared at him in horror. What jewelry? What vacation? Tyler, you never bought me anything. The necklace I gave you last month. The sapphire one. That was worth $5,000. You mean the necklace you said was a family heirloom? You told me it belonged to your grandmother. Agent Torres was taking notes. Mr. Morrison, are you saying you purchased expensive jewelry for Mrs. Morrison using funds from the business account? Tyler realized too late that he'd just implicated Ashley in his crimes. No, yes, but she didn't know where the money came from. She thought it was a family piece. I gave it back to you 2 weeks ago, Ashley said, her voice rising, when you told me it was too valuable for me to wear casually. I thought you were being protective of your grandmother's memory. You gave it back because I needed to sell it to pay for the ring, Tyler admitted. The business account was running low, and I needed more money for something special. Agent Torres looked between Tyler and Ashley with the expression of someone who had seen this type of family drama play out in criminal cases many times before. Mrs. Morrison, did you know that the necklace was purchased with embezzled funds? Of course not, Ashley said. I thought it was a family heirloom. If I'd known it was stolen, I never would have accepted it. But you did accept expensive gifts from someone you'd only known for a few months, Agent Torres pointed out. Gifts that you now know were purchased with stolen money. Ashley's face went pale as she realized the implication. Even though she'd returned the necklace, the fact that she'd accepted it in the first place could be seen as evidence of a conspiracy. Agent Torres, I interjected. My wife had no knowledge of Tyler's criminal activities. She believed his lies about his family's wealth, just like everyone else. She's a victim of his deception, not an accomplice to his crimes. That may be true, Mr. Morrison, but we'll need to conduct a full investigation to determine the extent of everyone's involvement. 2 uniformed officers approached Tyler, handcuffs ready. Tyler Morrison, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and possession of stolen property. As they read him his rights, Tyler kept looking at Ashley with a mixture of desperation and accusation. Ashley, you have to help me. Tell them we're in love. Tell them you were going to leave Daniel for me. They'll understand that I was just trying to provide for the woman I love. Tyler, Ashley said quietly, I can't help you. I won't help you. You lied to me about everything. You made me believe you were successful and honest, and instead, you're a thief who was planning to drag me into your criminal activities. But you kissed me, Tyler protested as the officers began to lead him away. You agreed to leave with me. That has to count for something. It counts as evidence of how good you are at manipulating people, Ashley replied. But it doesn't make what you did any less criminal. As the police car carrying Tyler disappeared into the night, Agent Torres turned her attention back to Ashley and me. Mrs. Morrison, we're going to need you to come to the federal building tomorrow for a formal interview. We need to document everything Tyler told you about his family's business and any gifts or promises he made to you. Will I need a lawyer? Ashley asked. That's your choice, but I'd recommend it, even though we don't currently consider you a target of the investigation. Your testimony could be crucial in building our case against the Morrison family. Ashley nodded numbly. What about the necklace? Should I have kept it as evidence? We'll need you to provide us with a detailed description of it and any photographs you might have. Tyler will have to tell us what happened to it after you returned it. After Agent Torres left with her team, Ashley, Nina, and I were alone in the chapel grounds. The silence was deafening after all the chaos of the evening. In the distance, we could still hear music from the reception, where our guests were presumably still celebrating, unaware that the groom had just helped arrest the man who tried to steal his bride. Ashley sat down on the chapel steps again, her wedding dress now wrinkled and stained from the evening's events. "Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What do you want to know? How long have you been planning this? How long have you known that Tyler was going to try to steal me away tonight?" I sat down beside her, leaving enough space to show respect for the emotional distance that now existed between us. I didn't know for certain that he would make a move tonight. I suspected he might try something at the wedding because it would be his last chance before we left for our honeymoon. But you were prepared for it. You had the FBI ready to arrest him. You had Nina recording everything. You knew exactly how to manipulate the situation to expose him. Ashley, I've been investigating Tyler for weeks. I knew he was involved in his family's criminal activities. I knew he was lying about his wealth and his prospects. What I didn't know was whether you would choose him over me when you thought you had the chance. Ashley looked at me with tears in her eyes. So this was all a test? Our entire wedding was just an elaborate setup to see if I would betray you? The wedding was real, Ashley. My vows were real. My love for you was real. But yes, I needed to know who you really are before we started our life together. And now you know. Yes, now I know. Nina, who had been quietly documenting this conversation as well, finally spoke up. "Ashley, can I ask you something?" "What?" "Do you love Daniel?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. "I thought I did. I wanted to, but when Tyler offered me a different life, a more exciting life, I was tempted. I was more than tempted. I was ready to throw away everything Daniel and I had built together for the promise of something better. Even though you barely knew Tyler? That's what makes it worse, isn't it? I was ready to abandon my marriage for a fantasy. I was so focused on what I thought I was missing that I couldn't see what I actually had. I stood up and walked to the edge of the chapel grounds, looking out over the gardens where we'd taken our wedding photos just hours earlier. "Ashley, do you want to know the truth about why I didn't tell you about my wealth?" "Yes. Because every relationship I'd ever had before you ended the same way. As soon as women found out about my family's money, they changed. They started seeing dollar signs instead of seeing me. They became focused on what I could buy them, where I could take them, what kind of lifestyle I could provide." I turned, back to face her. "When I met you, you were different. You were working 2 jobs to pay for your graduate degree. You were independent and ambitious, and you didn't seem impressed by material things. You told me you wanted someone who would love you for who you are, not what you could offer them. So you decided to test that?" I decided to see if it was true, and for almost 2 years it was. You were content with our simple dates, our modest apartment, our quiet life together. You never complained about money or asked for expensive gifts. You seemed genuinely happy with what we had. Ashley wiped tears from her eyes, smearing her carefully applied wedding makeup. "So what changed?" "Tyler changed things. Tyler made you start questioning whether what we had was enough. Tyler made you start wanting more. That's not fair, Daniel. You can't blame Tyler for my choices." "You're right. I can't. Tyler may have been the catalyst, but the choice was yours. The willingness to betray our marriage was yours. The desire for something more exciting, more luxurious, more impressive than what we had together. That was yours too." Nina cleared her throat. "I hate to interrupt, but what happens now? I mean, you're still married. Legally, nothing has changed." Ashley and I looked at each other across the space that now felt like an ocean between us. "Nina's right," Ashley said. "We're still married. We still have a reception full of guests waiting for us. We still have a honeymoon planned for next week." "Do we?" I asked. "Ashley, an hour ago you were ready to leave with Tyler. You were ready to abandon our marriage for a man you barely knew. Do you really think we can just go back to the reception and pretend this never happened?" I don't know. I don't know what I think anymore." I pulled out my phone and checked the time. "Our guests are going to start wondering where we are soon. We need to decide what we're going to tell them." "What do you want to tell them?" Ashley asked. "I want to tell them the truth. I want to tell them that my wife chose another man on our wedding day. and that the other man turned out to be a federal criminal who tried to involve her in his crimes. Ashley flinched. That will humiliate me in front of everyone we know. You humiliated yourself, Ashley. You humiliated our marriage. You humiliated the vows we just made in front of God and all our friends and family. So you're going to punish me for it? I'm not going to punish you. I'm going to tell the truth. There's a difference. Ashley stood up and brushed off her dress. And what about us? What about our marriage? What about it? Do you want to stay married to someone you were ready to abandon for a criminal? Do you want to spend the rest of your life wondering if I'm wealthy enough to keep you satisfied? Do you want to build a life with someone you don't trust enough to be honest with? Do you want to stay married to someone who betrayed you on our wedding day? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with all the implications of the evening's revelations. No, I said finally. I don't. Ashley nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. Then I guess we have our answer. Nina had stopped recording and was looking between us with obvious sadness. I'm sorry, you two. I really thought you loved each other. We did, I said. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes you need trust, loyalty, and shared values, too. And sometimes, Ashley added, you need to know who someone really is before you marry them. I laughed bitterly. Ashley, you've known who I really am for 2 years. You just didn't like that person enough to stay with him when you thought you had a better option. That's not true, isn't it? If Tyler had been everything he claimed to be, if he really had been wealthy and successful and honest, would you have chosen differently tonight? Ashley opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again, realizing that any answer she gave would only prove my point. That's what I thought, I said. From the reception hall, we could hear the band starting to play again, probably wondering where the bride and groom had disappeared to. Soon, someone would come looking for us, and we'd have to face all those people who had come to celebrate what they thought was the beginning of our happily ever after. Instead, they were about to witness the end of the shortest marriage in Portland. Why history? But before we faced our guests, before we dealt with the embarrassment and the explanations and the legal complications of ending a marriage that had lasted less than 3 hours, there was one more revelation that would change everything. Ashley thought she knew about the man she'd just lost. As we walked back toward the reception hall, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and smiled, despite everything that had happened tonight. What is it? Ashley asked, noticing my expression. A message from the children's hospital, I said. They're confirming that the new pediatric wing will be ready for the dedication ceremony next month. Ashley stopped walking. What children's hospital? Portland Children's Medical Center. My family has been funding a new pediatric cancer wing. It's been in development for 3 years, but we've kept it quiet until construction was completed. Your family funded an entire hospital wing? Not just funded, Ashley. We designed it, supervised the construction, and we're staffing it with the best pediatric oncologists in the country. The total investment is around $47 million. Ashley stared at me as if I'd just spoken in a foreign language. $47 million? Daniel, that's more money than most people see in several lifetimes. It's also less than 2% of my net worth. What's your net worth? She asked quietly. As of this morning's market close, approximately $2.8 billion. Ashley sank down onto a nearby bench, her legs apparently unable to support her anymore. Billion? With a B? Morrison Holdings isn't just a local real estate company, Ashley. We own commercial properties in 12 states. We have significant investments in technology startups, renewable energy projects, and pharmaceutical research. My grandfather started with one small apartment building in 1952. My father turned it into a regional powerhouse. I've spent the last 2 years turning it into a national empire. Nina, who had been walking behind us, let out a low whistle. Daniel, you're telling us you're a billionaire? Like, actually, legitimately a billionaire? According to Forbes, I'm number 47 on their list of America's richest people under 35. They did a feature article about me 6 months ago, but I requested that they not publish my photo or personal details. Ashley was shaking her head in disbelief. But you drive a Honda Civic. You live in a studio apartment. You wear clothes from Target. I drive a Honda Civic because it's reliable and efficient. I live in a studio apartment because I like the neighborhood and I don't need much space. I wear simple clothes because designer labels don't make me a better person. But why? If you have that much money, why live like you're struggling? Because I'm not living like I'm struggling, Ashley. I'm living according to my values. I'm living simply because I don't believe that wealth should be displayed like a peacock spreading its feathers. Ashley stood up abruptly and began pacing. This is insane. Do you have any idea what this means? Do you know what kind of life we could have had together? What kind of life is that, Ashley? We could travel anywhere in the world. We could buy houses in different countries. We could have anything we wanted, whenever we wanted it. And then what? After we've bought everything we want and been everywhere we want to go, then what? Would you love me more because I spent money on you? Would our relationship be deeper because we had expensive possessions? You don't understand what it's like to worry about money, Ashley said, her voice rising. You don't understand what it's like to want something and not be able to afford it. You're right, I don't. But I do understand what it's like to be loved for my money instead of for who I am. I understand what it's like to wonder if someone is with me because they care about me, or because they care about my bank account. I loved you before I knew about any of this. Did you? Or did you love the idea of me? Because the moment Tyler offered you what you thought was a better financial situation, you were ready to abandon everything we had built together. Ashley stopped pacing and turned to face me. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I hate that you're right. I did choose Tyler because I thought he could give me more than you could. I chose him because I was tired of budgeting and saving and worrying about whether we could afford the life I wanted. And what life did you want, Ashley? I wanted to feel special. I wanted to feel like I was worth something extraordinary. I wanted people to look at me and think I was successful, that I had made good choices, that I had married well. So it was never about loving Tyler. It was about what Tyler represented. It was about status. It was about security. It was about proving to myself and to everyone else that I deserved more than an ordinary life. Nina had been listening to this exchange with growing sadness. Ashley, can I ask you something? What? When you were with Daniel these past 2 years before Tyler came along, were you happy? Ashley thought about this for a long moment. Yes, I was happy. I was genuinely happy. We laughed together, we talked about our dreams, we supported each other through difficult times. I loved our quiet evenings at home, our long walks through the city, our simple dates at small restaurants. So what changed? Tyler made me start comparing. Tyler made me start thinking about what I didn't have instead of appreciating what I did have. Tyler made me start believing that I was settling for less than I deserved. But Tyler was lying about everything, Nina pointed out. So essentially, you gave up real happiness for an illusion. Ashley nodded, tears streaming down her face again. I gave up real happiness for an illusion. And now I've lost both. We had reached the reception hall, and through the windows we could see our guests still celebrating. They were dancing, laughing, toasting our marriage, completely unaware that the bride and groom had just decided to get divorced. Daniel, Ashley said quietly, what are you going to tell them? I'm going to tell them the truth. All of it? As much as they need to know. I'm going to tell them that our marriage is over, that it ended because of choices you made tonight, and that while I appreciate them coming to celebrate with us, there's nothing left to celebrate. Ashley flinched. You're going to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Ashley, you humiliated yourself. I'm just not going to help you cover it up. What about your reputation? What about your family's reputation? Won't this scandal hurt your business? My business is strong enough to survive a personal scandal. My family's reputation is built on 60 years of ethical business practices and community service. A failed marriage isn't going to destroy that. But what about the money? The prenup says I get nothing if I cheat on you. But technically, I didn't cheat. We were married for less than 3 hours, and I never actually slept with Tyler. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the video Nina had taken. Ashley, we have video evidence of you kissing another man on our wedding day and agreeing to leave me for him. We have recorded testimony of you accepting expensive gifts that you now know were purchased with stolen money. We have documentation of you meeting secretly with a man who was planning to flee the country to avoid federal prosecution. You think I was part of Tyler's criminal conspiracy? I think you were a victim of Tyler's lies, but I also think you made choices that put you in a legally vulnerable position. Whether or not you face criminal charges, you certainly violated the terms of our prenuptial agreement. Ashley sat down heavily on the steps leading to the reception hall. So I get nothing. You get your freedom, Ashley. You get to start over with someone who shares your values and your priorities. You get to find someone who will give you the lifestyle you want without requiring you to compromise your integrity. And what do you get? I get the knowledge that I found out who you really are before we wasted years of our lives in an unhappy marriage. I get to find someone who will love me for who I am, not what I can buy for them. Nina was standing a few feet away, still holding her camera but no longer recording. Daniel, can I ask you something personal? What do you want to know? Why didn't you ever tell Ashley the truth about your wealth? Not to test her, but just because you trusted her enough to share that part of your life with her? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that she would change. Afraid that she would start seeing me differently. Afraid that she would start wanting things from me instead of wanting me. But by not telling her, you never gave her the chance to prove that she wouldn't change. You're right. I never gave her that chance. I was so focused on protecting myself from being used for my money that I never considered the possibility that Ashley might have been strong enough to handle the truth. Ashley looked up at me with surprise. You really think I might have been strong enough? I wanted to believe you were, but I was too scared to find out. So we both made mistakes, Ashley said. You didn't trust me enough to be honest, and I didn't love you enough to be faithful. I think that's a fair assessment. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the music and laughter from our reception. It felt surreal to be discussing the end of our marriage while 200 people celebrated what they thought was the beginning of our life together. Daniel, Ashley said finally, what happens to the money? I mean, you've spent so much on this wedding, on our apartment, on our life together. What happens to all of that? The wedding is paid for regardless of whether the marriage lasts. The apartment lease is in my name, so you'll need to find somewhere else to live. As for the rest of it, we'll work it out through our lawyers. How long do you think it will take? The divorce, I mean. In Oregon, if we agree on the terms, we can have an uncontested divorce finalized in about 90 days. Given the circumstances, I don't think there will be much to argue about. Ashley nodded. And what about Tyler? What do you think will happen to him? Tyler is facing federal charges for embezzlement, conspiracy, and theft. Given the amount of money involved and his family's history of fraudulent business practices, he's probably looking at significant prison time. Do you feel sorry for him? I thought about this question seriously. I feel sorry for anyone who throws their life away for money. I feel sorry for anyone who thinks that wealth gained through theft and lies is worth the risk of prison and disgrace. But do I feel sorry for Tyler specifically? No, I don't. He made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. What about me? Do you feel sorry for me? I feel sorry that you couldn't see what you had. I feel sorry that you let someone else's lies convince you that what we had together wasn't enough. I feel sorry that you chose potential wealth over actual love. Ashley stood up and smoothed down her wedding dress. I need to go in there and face everyone. I need to tell them that the fairy tale is over. Do you want me to go with you? No. I think I need to do this myself. I made this mess. I should be the one to clean it up. Ashley, before you go in there, I want you to know something. What? I did love you. I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone. I loved you enough to risk my heart, even though I was terrified of being hurt. I loved you enough to plan a life with you, even though I knew that my wealth could complicate things. I loved you enough to marry you, even though I suspected you might not be strong enough to handle the truth about who I really am. Ashley began crying again, but these tears seemed different from the others she'd shed tonight. These tears seemed to come from a place of genuine regret rather than self-pity. I loved you too, Daniel. I loved you more than I understood, and I threw it away for something that wasn't even real. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for that. Maybe forgiveness isn't the goal, Ashley. Maybe the goal is learning from this experience so you don't make the same mistake again. What kind of mistake? The mistake of thinking that what someone can give you is more important than who they are. The mistake of believing that your worth is determined by your partner's wealth. The mistake of thinking that love isn't enough when it's actually the only thing that matters. Ashley nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I understand now why you tested me. I understand why you needed to know who I really was before you shared your whole life with me. And I understand now that by not trusting you with the truth, I made it easier for someone like Tyler to manipulate you. If you had known from the beginning that I was wealthy, Tyler's promises wouldn't have seemed so appealing. So we both learned something tonight. Yes, we did. We learned that we weren't right for each other, and we learned it before we wasted years of our lives trying to make it work. Ashley took a deep breath and walked toward the reception hall doors. Just before she reached them, she turned back to me one last time. Daniel, do you think you'll ever be able to trust someone enough to tell them the truth about your wealth from the beginning? I hope so. I think tonight taught me that secrets are more dangerous than honesty, even when honesty feels risky. And do you think I'll ever find someone who will love me for who I am, even knowing that I'm capable of making terrible choices? I think you'll find someone who will love you because you learned from your terrible choices, not despite them. Ashley smiled sadly and opened the doors to the reception hall. The music stopped abruptly as she walked in, and I could hear the confused murmur of voices as our guests realized something was wrong. Nina and I stood outside, listening as Ashley began to explain to 200 people that her marriage had ended before the reception was over. It was one of the most difficult things I'd ever had to hear, but it was also one of the most honest moments of the entire evening. When Ashley finished speaking, there was a long silence, followed by the sound of chairs scraping and people gathering their belongings. Our wedding reception was officially over. As the guests filed out of the hall, some of them stopped to offer me their condolences or their support. Others just nodded sadly and continued on their way. A few asked if there was anything they could do to help, but there wasn't much anyone could do to fix what had been broken tonight. The last person to leave was Ashley's cousin Nina, who handed me her camera and all the memory cards. The video evidence is all yours, she said. But Daniel, I hope you know that not everything that happened tonight was Ashley's fault. What do you mean? I mean that secrets have a way of creating the very problems they're meant to prevent. You were so afraid of Ashley using you for your money that you created a situation where money became the central issue in your relationship. You think I'm responsible for what happened tonight? I think you're both responsible. Ashley made terrible choices. But you made it easier for her to make those choices by not trusting her with the truth. Nina was right, and I knew it. By keeping my wealth secret, I had created an artificial dynamic in our relationship that made Ashley feel insecure about our future. That insecurity had made her vulnerable to Tyler's manipulation. As I watched the last of our guests drive away, I realized that this evening had taught me as much about myself as it had about Ashley. I had learned that protecting yourself from potential pain sometimes creates actual pain. I had learned that testing someone's loyalty often reveals your own lack of trust. Most importantly, I had learned that real love requires real honesty, even when that honesty feels dangerous. Ashley and I were getting divorced, but we were both walking away from this experience with a better understanding of what we needed in a relationship. She needed someone who would appreciate her ambition without judging her for wanting security. I needed someone who would love me for who I was, not what I could provide. 6 months later, I would meet someone who valued character over wealth, someone who was impressed by my philanthropy, but not by my bank account, someone who would choose love over luxury every single time. But that's a story for another day. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.